you want to hear some music? You'd like that, wouldn't you? Well, today you're going to get all the music you want.
The request lines are now open. KGFJ Soul Radio.
Do it now, man.
Request lines are up.
It's open, man.
Got any Blue Oyster Cult?
No, I don't have any Blue Oyster Cult. I ate 34 pairs last time around. Where were you? I was that close to working at 7-Eleven, you know.
Pass the word along. Tell the men it's time to shoot the moon.
Shoot the moon!
Not out there on the microphone. On the microphone.
Shoot the moon. Shoot the moon.
The attitude dictates that you don't care whether she comes, stays, lays, or prays. I mean, whatever happens, your toes are still tapping.
Hey, Strawberry! Oh, Strawberry. Hey, what's happening, man? How you doing? This is my friend.
Hey, how you doing, man?
What you looking at, man?
Oh, nothing. I wasn't looking. I wasn't looking at his neck, man.
Can you honestly tell me that you forgot the magnetism of Robin Zander or the charisma of Rick Nielsen?
That's kid stuff.
Kid stuff. Well, how about the tunes? I want you to want me. The Dream Police. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Build your muscles picking strawberries. You know, Band and Scoop. Maybe I could get you a job with United Fruit. I got a buddy with United Fruit. Start with strawberries, you might work your way up to these goddamn bananas. When, boy, are you gonna get your act together?
We're creating a society of cell phone crazed, marijuana smoking zombies.
Coming to you not quite live from Lukewarm Tallboy Studios deep in the land of Gar, this is Bend and Scoop, the podcast featuring music, mirth, and minutia, focused on exposing artists you probably haven't heard, but should. I'm Bob, and I'll be your tour guide on this amazingly asymmetric auditory adventure as we journey to the center of your cochlea. Welcome to episode 49, which is also the James Gang's Best Funk. Joining us at the end of the show to play a round of Is That Your Vinyl Answer in the Groovin' After Party will be our very special guests Stephen and Sonny from the Growin Up Rock podcast. We spread the gospel of vinyl here at Bend and Scoop, so be sure to tell us all about your favorite neighborhood record store by posting to @BendScoop on Twitter or Instagram using the hashtags BendMomAndPop. Our record store of the week is a favorite of our special guest, Stephen, Criminal Records in Atlanta. You can follow them on Twitter and Instagram, both @Criminal Records, on Facebook @Criminal Records ATL, and you can check out their website at criminalatl.com. Denton, Texas is home to Bad Sports, whose 2018 album, Constant Stimulation, opens with this scorcher, Giving In, on Bend and Scoop.
I want to ignore W-E.
Danny and the Darlenes out of Detroit there with Let's Stomp from 2016's Bug Out. Have you ever wanted to host a podcast? Well, all you have to do to join the mic hunt and host your very own episode of Assume the Juxtaposition is send me your topic idea to lukewarmtallboy@gmail.com. You can follow Assume the Juxtaposition on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at AssumeTJPod. The latest episode features Lyle Jones and Gary Grant attempting to cast a hypothetical reboot of 1981's comedy classic, A Cannonball Run. Permanent Greenlight were an LA-based band whose 2018 LP Hallucinations included this Matthew Sweet-esque track called You and I Are the Summertime, here on Bend and Scoop.
car, both of you. Now. All right, hit it. Hit it? Hit it? Freeze or name your beneficiary.
Beneficiary?
And you, Shorty. Where'd you get all that jewelry?
Why do you call me Shorty?
Because you're small. Small. SMO.
Time is right. Let me just smile a lot. Johnny Morrison's eyes. See if you're lying or not. Please and oh no, get ready to go home at night. Wild by lunchtime, but everything's alright. Girls, let it ring for the fact that the boys won't sing. See the older guys slapping their heads with grease. Initiation rites contingent upon their release. Please make solo. Mama got high-class trans. Margaret, middle school, enforcer of no romance. Girls take a chance for the fact that the boys can't dance.
That was Margaret Middle School by the ever-prolific Guided by Voices off their just-released 33rd album Earthman Blues. Pausable Deniability is a monthly podcast I co-host with my pal David Miller, which you can follow on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Pause Deny. We post new episodes on the first day of every month. Phillies Remember Sports has a brand new record out, Like a Stone, which features this great track, Easy, on Bend and Scoop.
Had a vision of you on your knees, talking softly, whispering things to Jesus. You used to fight me when my talk was cheap. You never stopped trying to see the bad in everything. I've been deep. I turn around to watch you fall all over me. I'm at the edge of the
AC. Keep on trucking. I don't want a chance and I don't want to drown you. I don't want to drown in your heat wave. Why'd you light a fire just to put it right out? Oh, I don't want to drown in your heat wave. Oh, the moon is rising above. The tide is changing for sure. I can't fight the pole. Heat wave. I don't want to drown, said I don't want to drown. No, I don't want to drown in your heat wave. Why you light a fire just to put it right out? No, I don't want to drown in your heat wave. Oh, the moon is rising above. The tide is changing for sure. I can't fight the pole. Heat wave. I don't wanna drown, said I don't wanna drown. No, I don't wanna drown in your heat wave. Why'd you light a fire just to put it right out? No, I don't wanna drown in your heat wave. I don't wanna drown, said I don't wanna drown. No, I don't wanna drown in your heat wave. I don't wanna drown, said I don't wanna drown. No, I don't wanna drown in your heat wave. I don't wanna drown in your heat wave.
That was American Lips from Montreal with one off their 2017 debut, Kiss the Void, called Heatwave. Campfire Songs is a podcast where I get together with my buddies Todd, Jim, and Tom to share and discuss songs with each other. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Songs Campfire and give us a listen for more great music. This next song by Boston's Hallelujah the Hills was actually written before anyone had ever heard of COVID, believe it or not. From 2019's I'm You, here's People Keep Dying and No One Can Stop It on Bend and Scoop.
By the light of a kill bomb machine, I don't wanna drown in your heat wave. Why'd you light a fire just to put it right out? No, I don't wanna drown in your heat wave. I don't wanna drown, said I don't wanna drown. No, I don't wanna drown in your heat wave. 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 I don't wanna drown in your heat wave.
Mother, I trust you had a pleasant day.
A nightmare, a living nightmare. You are killing me, Seymour. Killing me a slow death with this idiot spy business.
Mother, you don't understand.
What is there to understand? I'm looking at my son, Seymour Goldfarb Jr., son of Seymour Goldfarb, God rest his soul, and heir to the Goldfarb Girdle's fortune. And what is he doing? Walking around, acting like he was some goy movie star named Roger Moore. And for this, I sent you to the best schools. For this, I'm spending $8,000 on orthodonture work. For this, I'm going broke paying that Beverly Hills analyst. And now, this. The sleep-in maid found it under your pillow this morning. What is the meaning of this?
The meaning, Mother dear, is a quick death. I warned you not to interfere in my affair.
Seymour, put that away. It's liable to go off.
I'm terribly sorry, Mother, but you know too much. You see, in my business, even the deepest family relationships aren't worth a farthing.
Farthing, schmarthings. No.
Zeikazin, Mama.
Why, where did I go wrong?
You know something, Mama? You're too Jewish.
looking into my brain. If you count them all, seem like we don't look the same. Well, you're strong and cold, now the wheels are so out of control. Well, you're strong and cold, I can love, but don't love like before.
cool jam there by Seattle's Bread and Butter called Gotta Get Away from their 2020 LP Psycho World. How Many is a podcast where I get together with my friends Jesse, Jr., Gary, and Scott to debate a variety of pop culture topics, including movies, sports, TV, music, and more. You can follow How Many on Twitter at How Many Podcast and listen at howmanypodcast.com. And don't forget to stick around for the end of the show when we'll be joined in the Groovin' After Party by our special guests Steven and Sonny from the Growin Up Rock podcast. LA's Lars Finnberg released a great album in 2020 with an even better title, Tinnitus Tonight, which includes this banger, Beach Bass, here on Bend and Scoop.
Pioneer's PL518 probably offers today's best value in a direct drive turntable. We could tell you its tone arm rides on 10 times the conventional number of ball bearings for smoother tracking, or that its direct drive motor all but eliminates wow and flutter. But nothing we tell you will be as convincing as this. Pioneer, we bring it back alive.
Silence
R. Ring, aka Kelly Deal and Friends, there with Salt from their 2017 record Ignite the Rest. If you want to listen to all this great music without having to hear me drone on between songs, be sure to check out our Bend and Scoop Spotify playlist. If we played it and they have it, you can listen to it there. And if you enjoy listening to what we do here on Bend and Scoop, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. I recently got a new car, and while it definitely gets me where I need to go, it lacks the horsepower needed to compete in the Cannonball Run.
This is the story of an average guy and a beautiful girl.
Hi.
Don't tell me your name. I'll just call you Beauty.
You must be a sensitive person. I bet you're a fan of Rod McEwen's.
I try to be.
And his best friend.
I am Captain Chaos. Been a cop long?
And a family doctor.
Police. Come on right here.
And how they all set out one day in an ambulance from New York to California at 150 miles per hour.
California, here we come.
But they aren't the only ones. Because this is the Cannonball Run, America's illegal Grand Prix. And it doesn't matter how you get there. It's who gets there first. Burt Reynolds is the defending champion. On his team, Farrah Fawcett.
Are you one of those volleyballers?
Cannonballs.
Dom DeLuise and Jack Elam. And here comes the competition.
Will you hurry up, you little...
Dean Martin.
We happen to be in a race.
Sammy Davis Jr.
You, Shorty. Where'd you get all that jewelry?
Take a left.
Mel Tillis and Terry Bradshaw. Jackie Chan. And Roger Moore as himself.
I'm Roger Moore. Roger Moore.
All of them. Reckless.
We're in kind of a hurry, so if you could just bless it and then we'll be...
Unscrupulous.
Oh, I gotta bless her. Oh, I'm sorry, Father. She's a Zen Buddhist.
Desperate characters.
Ready, fire!
By land, by sea, by air. They'll do anything, drive anything, say anything.
It's hard to understand you.
When I called you, I was doing 140 miles an hour.
And stop at nothing.
Normally I drive right around the speed limit.
We all make mistakes, miss. But 160?
To win the Cannonball Run.
Yeah, we're looking good.
Come on, faster!
Cannonball Run. The only movie to get over 200 tickets before it even opens.
That cannonball. Perfect.
Cruising down the highway, hot tires are burning the ground. I'm driving too fast in this famous classic race. Welcome to Sweden. Gear up, there is
People listen to people. So listen, people.
Welcome to the Growin After Party. Come on in and pour yourself a cold one.
Joining me now for a Growin After Party here on Bend and Scoop are Steven and Sonny from the Growin Up Rock podcast. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us. I'll tell you, your podcast is about to get dumber and cooler at the same time. Because you had Rylan Rowe on from the Human Dads podcast. He said this word ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I wanted to look it up, but I couldn't spell it. So I didn't even look it up. So there you go.
Awesome. So guys, for those who may not have heard Growin Up Rock, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
So Growin Up Rock podcast is basically a trip for me back to the 80s when I grew up around rock and roll in my high school years. The difference in age between someone like myself and Sonny is roughly about 3 or 4 years. And in music and in high school, that makes all the difference in the world. He came in at a certain point on rock and roll versus where I came in on rock and roll. So it's just a completely different feeling. So we basically revisit times and do themes that are sort of centered around the music of that period of time. So hard rock, we say hard rock and metal, but it's guitar driven rock and roll from the late 70s, 80s, 90s. And then we venture into new rock as well. So we're kind of all over the place, but we've even gone outside and done an episode on Prince and things like that as well. So we're just having some fun with rock and roll, basically.
So you guys mentioned the early 80s. That's definitely my wheelhouse. I graduated high school in 84. So that time frame and that era of rock is right in my wheelhouse. As a matter of fact, I listened to you guys with Jay from the Hook Rocks talking about women and children first. First off, I'm glad you mentioned the U.S. Fest. Now, every time he said that, I was like, my head was just twitching like it's the US Festival. I have never, ever heard anybody call it the US Festival before. So I'm glad you guys straightened him out on that.
You like the JAM, the Texas JAM. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's funny is the only Texas Jam I went to, because those were here in Dallas, was the one with Van Halen in 86. It was the 5150 tour and Sammy Hagar. So I tell everybody, because I saw Van Halen with David Lee Roth in Austin on the 1984 tour. And then I saw him with Hagar in this one. And I always tell people I prefer them on record with Dave, but live, they were way better with Sammy. It's a weird, they were just too wasted with Dave. They were incoherent. They weren't playing their instruments right. Hagar was a showman, man. That guy, he went around and ran up in the rafters, the lighting rig. It was crazy. But yeah, the Texas Jam, when you mentioned that, I'm like, I've even got a couple of vintage posters in my listening room in the front of the Texas Jam, those early 80s, late 70 versions. So those festivals from that era really take me back.
Well, now, Bob, I have to stop you right there. So, okay. So I totally understand what you're saying about the David Lee Roth thing, and it's a long venture between Sonny and myself, because Sonny fancies himself as a Hagar person. I grew up in the Roth era, and I know that there's been many, many shows. The U.S. Festival, as Jay would call it, was one of those shows where, Van Halen was just completely wasted for this US Festival. But my first concert was Van Halen with Roth on the Diver Down tour. And it was groundbreaking for me. And it was a monster. They were on target. They played amazing. Dave sounded fine. Dave's never going to sound great because that's not Dave's thing live, but Dave pulled everything off and it was great. So I know there's a lot of stuff out there where it's that, but they became an amazing live act first. on those first 5 or 6 albums. So
yeah, I definitely would have loved to have seen them a little earlier in Dave's run. Like maybe, you know, like all the footage I ever saw of like, say the Fair Warning tour, that looked, and that's my favorite Van Halen album. So I would love to have seen them at that point. But yeah, by 1984, and it was that summer, like they broke up not too long after that, you know, so it was, I remember we were able to see, we were in the upper deck and right kind of to the side, so you could kind of see behind the stage, behind the curtain, and you could see Valerie Bertinelli behind stage, and she looked like she was kind of waggling around, like maybe she'd had a few as well. So I think everybody was kind of in the party mode at that point.
Yeah,
it was the 80s. We were all in the party mode back then.
Yes, we were. We definitely were. I thought that was a great episode, the Women and Children First. Yeah, there's some, you guys, I'm really glad you singled out some of the tracks that you did, you know, like In a Simple Rhyme and Take Your Whiskey Home. Those are, you know, Romeo Delight. Those are really underrated tracks. And those are ones that don't get a lot of, you know, play and discussion, but those are awesome tunes on that album.
Yeah, I think most of the time at Growin Up Rock, we try to venture a little bit deeper into whatever music we're talking about, because, you know, for Sonny and I, we're not necessarily radio listeners. We like to dive a little bit deeper than just, you know, the hit singles that you hear on radio every 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, and the thought process are completely different, right? So as Stephen was saying earlier, if you went to high school, let's say you graduated in 82, 86, 90, 94, your take on what's good and what's bad is completely different in rock, right? So I graduated in 86, right? So, and I'm graduating in San Francisco. So I'm a West Coast guy the whole way, where on top of it, Steven's an East Coast guy. And, you know, bands like Y&T didn't resonate East Coast, but bands like Kix didn't resonate on West Coast, right?
Yeah.
So there's that thing too. So there's always a different kind of take. But yeah, I've been kind of taking a beating on the Van Halen Daily Roth years because I don't love it all. So I get a lot of comments about, oh, come on, Sonny, that's a great song. I can't wait to get to the Hagar years.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about the Y&T, for example, because I had a friend back in that time frame that moved here from San Francisco, and he was a huge Y&T guy. And at the time, I'd never heard of him. And, you know, shortly thereafter, I think Summertime Girls came out and they got some MTV play and stuff. But before then, I was like, who's Y&T? And he's like, oh, they're huge, man. They're big. So it is a regional thing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and Sonny had the benefit, like he was saying, he is a West Coast guy, I'm an East Coast guy, but Sonny also had the benefit of growing up in a big city, where I grew up in a really small city. I had to travel 2 hours just to see a concert.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference for me, because I only saw pretty much major bands that were doing major tours and hitting smaller markets. Whereas Sonny could see small and big bands, and he could see them 2, 3, 4 times in a regional area that was surrounding the Bay Area. And that's a huge difference.
Yeah. And sometimes the city where they have the concerts, it's the type of bands that'll come through there. Like I grew up halfway between Austin and San Antonio. And so I was about half an hour south of Austin and about an hour north of San Antonio. San Antonio has always been a huge metal town, hard rock, big time. And Austin's a lot more like indie rock, college music, that sort of thing. So Van Halen did come through Austin, but, you know, Van Halen's more of kind of the mainstream hard rock stuff. But if I wanted to see, you know, Judas Priest or, you know, I mean, a matter of fact, when I did see Judas Priest, Great White opened up for him. This is, you know, pre-Fire, obviously. But those are the kind of bands that they wouldn't go through Austin. They went straight to San Antonio. So a lot of times you're at the mercy of what the tour schedule's like and whether they're going to even come through your area or not.
Yeah, I had definitely more of a chance, and there's smaller clubs here in San Francisco at the time. So you would get a big act that has an opening act with them, and they're going to play, let's say, Tuesday in San Jose, Thursday in Oakland, and then Saturday in Sacramento. But they'll play Friday in a club in San Francisco, the opener will, right? So you can catch them all. It was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, that's pretty great. And here in Dallas-Fort Worth, there's a lot more opportunity for different styles of music and different size venues. So I definitely feel what you're talking about, Stephen. The smaller areas, you're kind of just at the mercy of what comes through and how far you have to go. So yeah, for sure. So guys, let's learn a little bit more about each of your own personal musical journeys. And we're going to play around with something here we like to call, Is That Your Vinyl Answer? And let's start off with asking you both, what was the first record you ever bought with your own money?
So for me, it's a Christmas 1984. I got Christmas money, birthday money. The intent was to go to Tower Records in Pleasant Hill and buy Animalize, Slide It In, and Purple Rain.
Nice.
And when I was looking through the Kiss bin, I didn't know they had makeup, so I bought Dynasty that day too. So I bought 4 albums the same day. Yeah, Tower Records. I mean, come on, can't do better than Tower Records.
Awesome. How about you, Steven?
For me, I walked 10 minutes up the road to the mall and went and visited Sears and Roebuck that used to sell vinyl. And the first 2 albums that I picked up with my own money was Boston's debut album,
awesome,
and the Cars debut album.
Boy, those you hit a couple of homers on those, man. Those fantastic records.
Jackpot.
Yeah, jackpot. Of course, Sonny's were really good too. I mean, those. White Snake and Kiss and Prince. Those are all huge hits.
Let me say this. So those were the 2 first albums that I bought with my own money, but I probably, like a lot of other people, I owned 45s. I mean, I bought 45s of, Sean Cassidy or
Convoy.
Convoy, or one that I, it's funny you say Convoy, because one that I do remember having is Eastbound and Down, Jerry Reed.
Yeah, Smokey and the Bandit.
Smokey and the Bandit. And I remember also having La Chic, Freak Out.
Freak Out. Yeah, That's a great one. That's a great one. Now, Sonny, your age, you probably were more of a single guy than a 45 guy, right?
Yeah, I have a few 45s, but the singles were coming up hot and heavy. Yeah. I've got a bunch of those.
Sonny's also a child of the MTV generation, and I wasn't. I was AM FM radio.
Was that more just because they didn't have MTV in your small town, Stephen?
It was 2 things. It's at 3 or 4 years. That's one thing. And yes, only the upper class had MTV, of which I was not a part of.
So do you guys still have any of those first records? Oh, look at this. Look at this.
Not all 4, baby, right here.
Them up.
All 4.
Fantastic. I wore out that White Snake cassette. Man, that was nonstop listening right there.
I do not have any of my my initial albums and stuff.
Which band or artists' albums make up the largest portion of your collection?
For me, if you're looking at LPs, it's Prince.
Okay.
If I'm looking at CDs and cassettes, it's Kiss. If I'm looking at MP3s, I have over 3,000 MP3s of Prince music.
Wow.
Right. And just like Rylan was kind of talking about, bootlegs, et cetera, I don't own any other bootlegs except for Prince. I was finding Prince bootlegs everywhere because I love Prince so much. So that's kind of my deal.
So for me, I wasn't a huge vinyl collector. I was more of a cassette collector. And it was mainly a space thing. That's kind of the generation where I came in. You could collect cassettes or vinyl. And I ventured off into vinyl a little bit, but didn't really have the space. Recently, Sonny had purchased a few albums to give me, which were really nice.
Yeah.
And then I also inherited roughly a crate full of albums from my brothers and sisters that had some really good stuff in it. Some old Zeppelin and Beatles, Beach Boys, Fleetwood Mac, some really classic stuff. So I hung on to that as well. So I got a lot of MP3s. A lot of digital music, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, good Lord, I want to say somewhere around 30 to 50,000 songs.
Wow.
But I used to have stacks of CDs because I used to work for a record distributor.
Yeah.
And every Friday we would walk out of the record distributor, and this isn't an exaggeration, with literally a stack of CDs that were probably 1.5 to 2 feet big every Friday.
Wow.
And so, I tried not to take things that I wasn't interested in, because there were some things that I was just like, yeah, I'm not ever going to listen to that. And I did that. But then, life happens and things go on, and eventually you move and you downsize and you do all these things. So I just didn't have the space for it. I had literally probably 5 or 6 racks full of CDs, which were roughly about 2,000 CDs at one point. And I just, as technology grew, I just started ripping this stuff to the computer.
And is there any single band that's the biggest quantity of that? Or
I couldn't even begin to tell you. I mean, I can tell you that I got complete catalogs on bands like Van Halen and Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and things like that. Like I have complete catalogs on those bands, but how much of one stuff do I have to another? I know I got a lot of Kiss because they have a lot of albums.
What's your favorite Kiss album?
My favorite Kiss album is probably somewhere around Rock and Roll Over or Love Gun. There's things that I like about both those records, but those are probably my 2 favorite. My entry into Kiss was Creatures of the Night.
Better that than Music from the Elder, I guess, right?
Let Sonny tell you that story.
Yeah.
So I actually listened to a podcast not too long ago that did a whole episode on Music from the Elder. I was like, this is insane. I remember getting that when it first came out. Sonny, what's your favorite Kiss record and your favorite Prince record? I know you mentioned Prince is your biggest collection, but I'm curious because you're such a big Kiss guy also.
Yeah, Kiss favorite records, Asylum. That's where I came in. That was my first Kiss show, so it'll always be Asylum. My favorite Prince record, Purple Rain, hands down, but the Gold Experience is probably a close second.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we've had so much Kiss talk because a buddy of mine this afternoon informed me that they are coming into Fort Worth on October the 1st. I've never seen them live, so we are going. Me and several buddies. Now, I know it's not like the original 4, and it's not the same experience like I would have got in the 70s, but I'm still pretty excited getting to see them with the whole get up before they quit touring. So
you know what? Suspend all that crap and just go and have a great time because it's a great show. You'll have an awesome time. People tend to overthink some of this stuff way too much. Like, oh, it doesn't have all the original guys or they're 70 years old or whatever. Just go and have a good time. It's music and it's a great show.
Yeah, that's great advice because a couple years ago, I finally got to see Cheap Trick for the first time. I'm a huge fan of theirs. And I spent so much time agonizing over the fact that Bunny Carlos isn't in the band anymore. And I'm like, man, I can't believe I didn't see him. But it was a great show. They sounded great. Now, for either of you guys, is there any specific album that you've purchased the most number of times?
Yeah, for me, I've got probably 10 copies of Purple Rain in different ways, right? Because I ran that vinyl into the ground, but I kept it. Then I had to get one. I'm like, well, let it evenly warp between the two. Then I switched to cassette. Then I switched to CD and, on and on and on. But I had this weird thing with one album, and I have, I think, 17 copies of it. It's the Steel Heart debut album from 1990. And I love that album so much.
Yeah.
That every time I would see it in the clearance bin, I had to feel like I had to save it. So if it was under $1, I would buy it just so I could have another copy. So I have 17
like rescuing
copies.
A puppy from the shelter.
Basically. Yeah. I don't know why I was doing it with that one album, but I have a bunch of them.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Stephen, what about you?
No, I'm cheap.
Yeah, that's true. Unless it came 3 for $1, he wasn't touching it.
I knew that would get a rise out of Sonny. No, truthfully, really, there aren't that many. I can remember buying, for whatever reason, a few times Pyromania on cassette and LP, I think. I did the same for Tesla's Mechanical Resonance because I know I bought that. That was one of the first actual CDs that I bought. So I already had the album. I already had the cassette. And so I purchased it on CD when I started moving everything over to the CD. And then I finally figured out the record industry scam of coming up with these new technologies and making people buy 50 copies. And I said, I'm not playing that game.
Who among your friends or family, and this could include yourself, has the largest collection of vinyl? I'm guessing, Sonny, is it you? Do you have the largest vinyl collection of anybody you know?
Well, I have probably about 300 pieces of vinyl. I've got probably 4,000 CDs, but yeah, I've got about 300 pieces of vinyl. Steve Wright, Potter Than Hell podcast. I talked to him the other day. He's getting around 800. He's a good friend of mine.
Oh, nice.
And then Joe Polo, who does the podcast Rock City with me, he probably only has 24 unique albums because he only buys Kiss albums.
Yeah.
But he has 1,200 copies of them because he has the Indonesian, the German, the Brazilian, the African. Like every day he's buying a new Killers version. I don't know why. So I think he has thousands and thousands of that stuff.
So I imagine in some of those countries, maybe the cover art's a little bit different, or there's different stickers or labels. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
Change songs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the sequence. Yeah. Steven, what about you? Who do you know has the largest vinyl collection?
I'll tell you who beats Steve Wright, Sonny, and I bet this person has more vinyl than both of us. I bet BJ Cramp has a lot. BJ Cramp is a friend of ours who's another podcaster. He used to have the Rock and or Roll podcast, but he's kind of blacklisted for right now until he brings it back. But he's in jail or whatever right now. Not actual jail. I mean, his podcast is in jail, but he has a lot of vinyl for sure. He probably has more than us. None of my family members, I definitely have more music than any of my family members do. And so he would be who I think has more.
For each of you guys, what would you say is your favorite record store, either currently or all time?
Yeah, for me, it was Tower, Sam Goody, the warehouse. I used to work at a warehouse, so that helped a little bit. There's a chain called Rasputin's here, who at one point had like 8 or 9 record stores, but now is trimmed down a little bit. Amoeba Records, there's one in LA.
Amoeba's
there's
awesome.
ones here. They're awesome. Dimple Records in Sacramento. So we would make a day out of it. Like we would go to Berkeley, park a Telegraph, go out of all the record stores, go to San Francisco, park near Broadway, kind of do the same thing. Nowadays, Rasputin Records is still around. I was there the other day.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, they had maybe 10% of the vinyl they used to have. I guess vinyl's going nuts right now. So they got no used vinyl. They got no new vinyl. Like they've
been picked clean, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Pick clean. There's a guy, he's almost doing like a eBay store out of a brick and mortar type of place. He's only open like 12 to 6 on certain days of the week. And his record store is called RPM Records. It's about a block away from me. So total mom and pop place, pretty cool place. So every once in a while I'll go there too.
Oh, awesome. Steven, how about you? Any place there where you're at or that you remember growing up?
Growing up, definitely there was this import record store these 2 English people ran. And truthfully, I can't remember the name of it, but we used to hang out there on weekends all the time. And then the other one was this record bar at the mall. We did inventory for Record Bar once a quarter, and they would help us out with letting us return some of the cassettes and stuff like that we didn't really like. We'd try it and didn't like it and return it, and they'd let us trade it out and do stuff like that. So they were a chain record bar. And then here in Atlanta, there's a couple of fairly well-known, famous record stores. One is Criminal Records, and one of them is Wax and Facts. And they've both been around like for ages.
Having that connection's awesome.
It was huge in high school. I mean, that's what we did on the weekend. I told you, I grew up in a small town, so there wasn't a ton of stuff to do. So cruising the mall and hanging out at the mall and being able to go to a record bar and hang out with your friends. And we would read the magazines, like they had a magazine rack, and you would read Hit Parader and Krang magazine, and you would figure out like what band people were talking about. And then you'd go find the section and see if they had the record. And that's how you discovered new music back in those days.
Yeah. When I first went into record stores, they would spin either the one tape or the one LP or whatever, if they had a CD player yet, because it was new technology. By the time I get into my late teens, early 20s, 6 CD changers are already out on the market. So these stores would put 6 CDs in and let it just shuffle. So you'd be sitting in the store and, going through stuff. It's like, wait a second, who's that? Right? Who's that playing right now? What band is that? And then you would go buy it. Right. So, and then it went to, remember they had the listening stations. So you could go listen.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember those for sure. Those are very useful. Well, guys, this has really been fun. I enjoyed talking with you very much. Enjoy your podcast. Tell folks how they can follow Growin Up Rock and you guys on social media.
Well, everything is at Growin Up Rock. So Facebook at Growin Up Rock. And it's one word. It's spelled a little bit differently. It's GROWINUPROCK. And so you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Growin Up Rock. You can join. We have a private Facebook group called the Growin Up Rock Loud Minority Facebook group. So you can join that private Facebook group. We have a pretty positive bunch of people in there right now, and we try to keep it positive. There are some groups out there that just people get in there and they poison it with hating on bands and things like that. And that's just that's not really our thing. So we try to keep it positive for the most part. You can always go to the Growin Up Rock website. So it's growinUprock.com, GrowinUprock.
I'll tell you that the Facebook group, it gets passionate in there though, because the other day we had a conversation going between 3 people on who the original Tesla members were. It was getting pretty passionate.
And what day usually does the pod come out?
We haven't missed an episode in probably, we're about to release our 200th episode.
Oh, congrats.
So thank you. So we've released at least one episode every week, and oftentimes we'll even release a bonus episode on a Thursday. But our regular episodes come out every Sunday at midnight. So Sunday morning, they're in the box. The best way to do it is just go and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, and it'll just show up for you every Sunday morning.
Well, it's an awesome show, very entertaining. And there's not enough podcasts out there that are focused on that style of music, the old school hard rock and metal stuff, man. I'm glad to hear it and glad to hear you guys out there and keeping the torch lit. Love it.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and thanks for having us on. And yeah, we definitely raised the flag for that 80s rock, and we insert some new bands in there every once in a while that we know people like us would like, right? So, because there's some new bands that maybe people aren't into, but there's some good bands that got a little bit of the 80s flair that I think people would like.
Fantastic. Thanks again, guys.
Don't worry about it, guys. It's all in the mix.
Bye-bye, lardass.
Bend and Scoop is a production of Lukewarm Tallboy Studios.
We will return tomorrow morning with the sun.
Good evening, and have a good life.